Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm John Ray in Beijing. 2 weeks after winning the U.S. presidential election, Donald Trump is still stirring up controversy in America. On Monday, for the first time, he made remarks to specify policies for his tenure. What messages did his remarks send? How will President-elect Trump get along with the opposition forces that are lining up against him? And what direction are America's internal and external policies likely to take? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined by Jay Huang, founding partner of Jadestone Capital, former managing director of Intel China, and Rick Dunham, a visiting scholar at Tsinghua University. But before we begin, let's take a look at this.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump laying out his first 100 days in office.
My agenda will be based on a simple core principle: putting America first.
Trump vows to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, ease restrictions on U.S. coal production, and reduce government regulation. The announcement came in an online video, bypassing the traditional media with whom Trump has had a rocky relationship. Trump met with New York Times editors and reporters on Tuesday and with U.S. TV news journalists and executives on Monday in an off-the-record meeting described as a, quote, firing squad, with Trump railing against what he calls unfair treatment by the media. The Trump transition team played down the conflict.
It was very cordial, very productive, genial, but it was also very candid and very honest. I mean, from my own perspective, it's great to hit the reset button.
Trump has been busy meeting with potential cabinet members, but has continued to spar with critics. Over the weekend, Vice President-elect Mike Pence was confronted by the cast of the Broadway play Hamilton.
Vice President-elect Pence, I see you walking out, but I hope you will hear us just a few more moments.
Trump responded, tweeting, quote, "The cast and producers of Hamilton, which I hear is highly overrated, should immediately apologize to Mike Pence for their terrible behavior." And Trump bashed the U.S. comedy TV show Saturday Night Live for portraying him as clueless.
Google, what is ISIS?
Trump tweeted, quote, "It is a totally one-sided biased show. Nothing funny at all."
He's going to be made fun of, as he should be. Any president will be and should be. And he's got such a thin skin, he can't just shrug it off.
At least one entertainer is decidedly pro-Trump.
Ready for the Trump song, yes or no? Yes. Give me 3, 2, 1.
Familiar Times Square tourist attraction The Naked Cowboy showed up at Trump Tower with a new song.
The back of those corporations sounds like a good idea to me.
Gentlemen, do you think Mr. Trump looks more presidential as half of the Americans are recovering from the aftershocks and licking their wounds? Rick?
Well, if you look at polling, and polling was wrong all year, but if you look at polling, a number of people are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, there's a hardcore of people who will not, but I think that there are a lot of people, particularly moderate Republicans and Democrats, who really are upset about the gridlock, who want to see something good happen. I don't think that they're too optimistic about it, but they're trying to be hopeful.
And Jay, are you still recovering?
I think I'm recovered.
So what do you think of the presidency of Donald Trump? Is he likely to be very presidential?
Well, I think during this election, elites, including media, made a mistake, and then they somehow took him literally, but not seriously. And his supporter, on the other hand, didn't take him literally, but seriously. But right now, I think that we're all kind of in a puzzled stage, and everybody take him seriously, obviously, but we don't know, and what he has said, we can take it literally, and which part we cannot. So we are sort of wait and see, and what his true color is.
What do you think his enormous efforts to reconcile with the hostile media?
Well, he hasn't done very much of it. He left the media behind several times. There's a history of a protective pool, of having a small group of reporters shadowing the president in case of any kind of disaster, and he hasn't done that a few times. But he did go to the New York Times, and he did say, "I'd like to work together with you. I hope we're on the same team." That's seen both ways, that he wants to work with the press, but he wants the press to be his lapdog as well.
But do you think Trump and his team still believe the elite media are deplorables instead of being an ally after he assumes the presidency? Jay?
I think that deplorable is what's Hillary referring to Trump's and his supporters. Definitely, he has a hate and love relationship with the media. And we have to say, and he is a truly media savvy.
And he's also a New Yorker, isn't he?
Exactly. And that says that he may run some New Yorkers' respect to media as well. But I think really it's hard to tell is we really don't know what his president and presidency going to be look like, and whether he's going to run his president like he's running campaign. Pattern has been he says something really outrageous, and then it's up to his campaign manager and his VP candidate, Mr. Pence, and then to point it out, no, he didn't say that, or he didn't mean that. So we really don't know what his behavior as a president is going to be. So it's very difficult to judge, and then what's the relationship and he will have with the media.
But I do think he will use the elite media as a target, because during the campaign he could talk about Hillary Clinton, he could talk about his other opponents and attack them. He needs something to unify his forces, and I think attacking the media is going to be a way he's going to do it over and over again. So you will see him try to co-opt certain parts of the media, but at the same time I think you're going to see probably the most difficult relationship between a president and media since Richard Nixon.
Again and again, he starts to say that the country should heal the wound, and in doing that, he is ready to appoint two women who used to be his critics. One would be to the United Nations as the U.S. ambassador, and the other Secretary of Education. What do you think of this enormous effort to cross the bipartisan line?
Well, naming two women out of about 20 cabinet-level positions is not that good, because women are more than 50% of the population. But the reaching out is important. And in the case of Nikki Haley is one of the rising stars. She was the Republican chosen leadership of Congress to respond to President Obama's speech to the nation, the State of the Union this past year, and she was very critical. She said he wasn't presidential. And so I think that's important. And she's also Indian American, so to be an Indian American at the United Nations. Betsy DeVos was critical of him because she didn't believe he was conservative enough. She is a hardline conservative. She is a big believer in having public money go to private and religious schools through vouchers. And so that was a signal that was not really necessarily sent to the center, but to his Republican critics on the right. So I think in that way he is trying to reach out to the different wings of the Republican Party. I'm not yet sure he's reaching out to the Democratic Party.
But do you think the two women will be powerful symbol to unify those females who opposed President elected Trump, who was then the candidate, one of the presidential hopefuls?
I think the pick of a Secretary of Education could be a good one, and especially if she bringing the education reform. But I have observed an interesting phenomena. Maybe because Trump running a bizarre or an extreme campaign, somehow people's expectation to him is quite low. If he does something normal and then exceeded people's expectation, and in particular for some Trumps and supporters, they get carried away. It's a hail Trump. And as in comparison, for example, if we take Obama as example, right? In 2008, he and Hillary ran a bitter campaign. After that, he appointed Hillary as his Secretary of State. So compared to this, it's actually Obama did a lot more than Trump did. And if you look at the first two Secretary of Defense under Obama administration, both of them, and Gates and Hagel, actually are the Republicans. So far, we have not seen any Democratic nominee for his cabinet position yet. I'm not suggesting he should, but I'm just saying whatever he does, actually, in my opinion, is quote-unquote quite normal as a U.S. politician. But somehow people get carried away, hail him as a great leader just because he does something which is normal.
Donald Trump called for national unity in an address to mark the Thanksgiving holiday in the wake of what he called a long and bruising election campaign. He said emotions in the country were raw and that the time had come to begin to heal our divisions. What do you think, Rick, should be done in this regard?
Well, I think he is genuine when he says that. It was the most bruising campaign of my lifetime. It was the nastiest campaign since the beginning of the 20th century. But I think to do it, he needs to continue to reach out, and I think reach out beyond party lines. He needs to reach out to Chuck Schumer, who is the top Democrat in the Senate, and is someone who he has actually given money to and raised money for in the past when Donald Trump was a Democrat. So I think that what we want to see is continuing action, not only to reach out to people who don't agree with him all the time, but then also to lower the level of rhetoric. The tweets that he has sent out last week were not quite presidential. I mean, attacking actors, attacking failing media. I think he has to accept that he is in a different role now, and he has to play that part.
Jay, is it okay for you personally if the president-elect fails to honor the campaign pledges, such as launching investigation into the private email server of Hillary Clinton, his arch-rival during the campaign, and he would not probably build a wall along the Mexican border? It's exactly for these two critical issues that most of the supporters of the Donald Trump camp rallied behind the most unconventional presidential hopeful.
I don't have an issue with that. Actually, I think I made a mistake. I took his, during the campaign, I took what he said literally. Now I just completely ignore all his campaign rhetoric.
Now you have got a better understanding about politics, particularly election politics.
Particularly for Trump. So it's okay, but on the particular case, I don't think actually he has a power and then to at this stage, or he should actually saying, I'm not going to prosecute Hillary. And in particular, the reason he gave is he has been suffering so much. What kind of reason is this? If Hillary was guilty and violate law, it should be up to DOJ or FBI to prosecute her. And then it's maybe the president's role to pardon her, but it's not his role to say, I'm not going to prosecute her. I don't think that's actually correct.
Rick, do you think this positive posture not to investigate into the private email server would be patronizing and therefore utterly unacceptable for Hillary?
Well, I mean, I don't think she would like the thought that he was going to stop prosecution, because that assumes she should be prosecuted. But I agree. I think it's a very bad precedent for the president to tell the Justice Department, to tell the federal prosecutors whether to prosecute someone or not, because you're supposed to leave it in the American system up to the professionals, and politics is not supposed to interfere with it. And while most of the country would agree with him that it's behind us and to move on from his crooked Hillary talk, I actually don't think it was ethical what he did. And I mean, I would be worried about the Internal Revenue Service, that there are rumors in Washington, and who knows if rumors are ever true, that he would want to get rid of the director of the Internal Revenue Service and put his own person in there. The problem is he is being audited right now. He's being investigated for civil or criminal problems, and to have his own person there is a conflict of interest. I think you're going to see this because he has so many business interests. You're going to see a lot of really difficult ethics issues coming up.
For those who watch out and who follow very closely his political moves and maneuvers after the campaign success announcement, they might be wondering if this presidential-elect not only lectures the Justice Department, but also the British government when it comes to the appointment of the prospective British ambassador to the United States. What do you think of the embarrassment of Downing Street?
I think, as we all know, this is a joke, right? The president and United the president of the United States and try to appoint, a position for another country. So I think this is bizarre. I think if he continues doing similar things, I think it's it's quite shameful for United States, and people will not take the United States seriously in the global arena. Obviously.
I mean, I hope someone told him that he is not supposed to suggest ambassadors to other countries. He names American ambassadors to other countries. I mean, I'm sort of waiting for him to suggest to President Xi Jinping that Jackie Chan be the ambassador.
In his angry response to the suggestion of the president-elect, one MP of the British Parliament suggested Hillary Clinton be sent to the UK as the American ambassador.
Right.
But you are watching Dialogue with Rick Dunham and Jay Huang. We're discussing what's going on after Donald Trump, the fact was announced the the victor of the campaign. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us. Welcome back, gentlemen. At the very beginning of our discussion, we talked briefly about his reconciliatory gesture towards the hostile. At the same time, we are aware that many of the public speeches that Donald Trump made were actually posted first on the social media, bypassing the traditional media. Do you think this will serve to add to the hostility and mistrust between the Trump camp and the media, which is, of course, part of the elite establishment?
Well, it may add to the hostility, but I think it's smart of Donald Trump. I mean, I think his campaign used the technology of communication very effectively for the year 2016, tweeting in 140 characters, bypassing the media. He had more followers than the New York Times. And so I really think that it was important in framing the agenda. Also, the mainstream media was chasing after his tweets. He could change the subject by simply putting something out on social media. I think there will be complaints about it, but the President of the United States, as any other leader, should use whatever communications tools he or her can to effectively communicate. And in this case, he believes the media is hostile, the elite media, and so this is an effective way to bypass it.
You know, many Chinese netizens start to display their sense of humor by saying, well, now that the president-elect is to pull out of the TPP, he will be to retreat from the WeChat group. Okay, the organizer of the WeChat room 退群了, you know. So this kind of humor starts to emerge on the social media in China. What do you think of the impact arising from Donald Trump's rejection of TPP? Many, such as the Japanese and the European observers, point out in time that China will fill in the vacuum, assuming regional leadership. Is that a zero-sum game, Jay?
I think at this stage, the TPP announcement is actually rather symbolic, and because regardless, and it's dead, and you never pass through a U.S. Congress, even if Hillary was elected. So that's just have some symbolic impact, and I think a trade under Trump administration could be an issue for China, because China rely on trade a lot more than United States. If he deliver his campaign promise and going on into the protectionism, I think it's going to hurt China more than hurt the United States.
Donald Trump promised to create millions of high-paying jobs by bringing back jobs, and he hopes that the rejection of TPP will create this silver lining. Do you think the rejection itself is a silver bullet?
In short, no. This is one where I don't want to be a critic of him from day one, but I think that by being a protectionist, by pulling out of TPP, it will not create or sell a job. He has to do things that, there is a generation of middle-aged and older men, most without college educations in the industrial part of the U.S., who are out of work right now or feel they're underemployed. But you're not going, by pulling out of a trade deal, you're not going to give them jobs. You have to figure out a way to revive those areas. You can't just say we're pulling out of this trade deal so the auto factory is going to reopen or the steel mill is going to reopen. He has to figure out ways to create jobs. I'm somewhat skeptical, but who is to say that a Secretary of Commerce and a president truly committed couldn't do something to create some blue-collar type jobs? He's not talking about the jobs of imagination and innovation. He's talking about the old-fashioned jobs. And if the United States pumps enough government money in to subsidize some of these industries, maybe he could save some of those jobs. But I am somewhat skeptical that he's going to be able to deliver on those promises.
Jay, most of his supporters actually come from the Rust Belt, and those in the swing states actually could be losers in the global competition. Now, despite the fact that you said earlier you wouldn't take the campaign any literally or seriously any longer, he did roll out some policy options on the campaign trail, which might be viewed as the driving force and catalyst for the creation of jobs for those losers and the industrial workers in the Rust Belt. What would be those policy options? What do you think would be the deliverables for him?
I think that the challenge facing the United States and also global is some of this middle class job, which does not need a university degree or college education, but earn a decent and salary. Those jobs are gone. And not just purely because globalization or trade, it's actually because of the technology advancement. So this is an issue, actually, I haven't seen anybody or politician have a solution for that. Obviously, you cannot have everybody going through the university to get university education, become like a code programmer, etc. And so how we're going to cope with those challenges is unknown. So because of that, I doubt his policy and is going to be effectively address the Rust Belt workers, the issue, the blue-collar workers. I think that's the one of the main drivers for Trump get elected is the Rust Belt and the voters. But I think most of them, at the end of his presidency, is going to be extremely disappointed. And because I really doubt he can effectively improve those people's life, because those jobs are gone because of the technology advancement. You cannot roll the clock back and backwards. So that's my view.
And he has a demographic problem here. When I graduated from college in the 1970s, only about a quarter of Americans were graduating from college. Now nearly half of Americans are graduating from college. So it's that generation of men in their 50s and 60s who didn't go to college who have a problem. The next generation is more educated, more trained for the current economy. And so the problem is, what do we do with these men and their families as they age from their 50s, 60s and get older? That's the real challenge, because they don't have the skills for the global economy, or at least they would have to be retrained.
Most of the supporters of Donald Trump, the president-elect, are actually those who reject immigration, who are against globalization. And those guys are radicals who support the erection of war along the Mexican border. And therefore, Jay, more and more Chinese Americans have developed a strong feeling of insecurity. They say the sentiment of racial discrimination starts to flare up, and minority groups in the United States are likely to become the first casualty of the anti-globalization slogan and hallmark of the Donald Trump campaign. What do you think of the pervasive sense of insecurity for minority groups? And do you think they are likely to, some of the illegal immigrants are likely to be repatriated back to Mexico coercively?
In your previous question, we discussed about his conciliatory remark during Thanksgiving. Actually, one thing I hope he should have done is talk about this and the race issue, because you look at how he won this election, primarily three things: the Rust Belt, you mentioned about that, race, and ignorance. I think that he really should say something and clear up and where he really stands on this race issue in a country of immigration. And then we have almost like people from all over the world coming to United States. And then illegal immigration and legal immigration, I think this is a separate issue. And then I think his idea treating illegal immigration like people should be sent back to home, those measures already being taken under Obama's administration. This is not something new. I think the new thing is, and during the campaign, maybe he is intentionally or unintentionally and received the racial tension. I hope he should have done something and to address those issues.
In fact, Donald Trump has said something to keep a distance from ultranationalism. Do you think this starts to pay off?
I don't think so, because he has not very strongly attacked, condemned the rise of neo-Nazism. I mean, they call themselves alt-right, but they're white supremacists. And to me, it is a surprise. I think that he should go right after that. That would send the best signal to minorities in the U.S. And I think that the main minorities who have been targets since the election are Mexican Americans and Muslims. But there have been cases of Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, Jewish Americans, others who have been targeted for discrimination and for abuse. And I think that this is one where he really could reach out. And who is he going to lose if he attacks white supremacists and neo-Nazis? I don't see anything bad in it for him. It's just that he can be a stubborn man, and he doesn't want to make it seem that he's being forced to apologize for something that he doesn't believe is his fault.
By the end of this very enlightening discussion, Rick and Jay, if you can, very quickly, do you foresee that the alleged anti-globalization position of Donald Trump will amount to isolationism in world trade?
I think that we're going to see a retreat. I don't think the U.S. is going to be a leader in multilateral trade. I think the big question is whether he sets off a trade war by putting sanctions on.
Jay, very quickly.
I gave him the benefit of doubt and wait to see, because I really don't know where he truly stands on lots of those issues.
You're repeating prediction of unpredictability, a hallmark of Donald Trump's presidency. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.